Welcome in everybody to the 9th episode of the Free Play Podcast. I am the host, Eli Scales, and the Super Bowl's over. College football has been over, and so the world will set its eyes onto college basketball. MLB opening day isn't for around 40 more days, so there's plenty of time for that to be covered. But we're deep in the middle of college basketball season right now, and this is College Basketball 101, everything you've missed. For many people out there, I know you may have not been watching as much college basketball while the NFL playoffs were going on, or just the NFL regular season in general. It's kind of easy to lose sight of college basketball when there's so many things going on, especially around the holiday season. But we're almost a month away from the middle of March Madness right now. And so we're getting into the thick of things in the college basketball season. We know who's who. We know who's bad. We know who the potential Cinderella teams could be late in the season now. So the first thing we're going to kick this off with is just a conference ranking. So overall, the way I see it right now, and this sentiment is shared by many people across the country, is the best conference in the world right now is the Big 12. It's without a doubt the best conference. Teams in the conference such as Arizona, Iowa State, Houston, Kansas, BYU, Texas Tech, and then you have the opportunity for bubble teams in there like UCF, West Virginia, and Oklahoma State. So the Big 12 is full of a lot of really good teams and a lot of teams that could be fringe tournament teams. So I think the Big 12 is commonly held in regard as the best conference right now in America. And then they're closely followed, though, by the Big 10. The Big 10 has some really great programs like Illinois, Purdue, and Nebraska has been tremendous this season. Michigan State, of course. So there's really good programs in the Big 10. They're second on my list. Third, I have the ACC, just because of how good Duke and some of the other teams in the conference are. Miami's really good this year. They pulled off a big win against North Carolina last night, who's also really good. So the ACC is third for me. Fourth, I have the Big East. The Big East is basically, unless I'm forgetting somebody, a two-team race between St. John's and UConn. UConn is by far and away probably the better team, but those are just the two best teams in that conference. The Big East a bit down from last year. Teams like Marquette and Creighton aren't as good this year, which is something to note. And then maybe what was the best conference last year is the SEC. I have them in fifth. There's just a low overall lack of top-end team in the SEC right now. Debatably, the best team might be Florida or Arkansas, maybe Kentucky or Tennessee on a good night. But I just think in general the SEC has dropped off a lot from last year. Ole Miss has gone from a tournament team to a team that's not even going to be close to sniffing the tournament. So programs like OU have fallen significantly since I believe last year they were in the tournament. So overall, the SEC took a huge drop-off from last season, so that's just something to note here. And then I'm going to throw in a G5 here just because why not? Get us to a nice sixth even number. The West Coast Conference, I believe, is the best G5 in America right now. They're headlined by three 20-plus win teams in Santa Clara, Gonzaga, and St. Mary's. Gonzaga and St. Mary's we know about as tournament teams, perennial contenders coming out of the West Coast Conference, but Santa Clara has been really good this year. We'll cover them later on when we go through each conference so far. But the West Coast Conference is a conference to look out for in potential March Madness this season. Now moving into the Cinderellas. Some of these teams you may not consider Cinderellas because of how good they've been. And if you are plugged in, which you should be now after listening to this episode, you'll know that some of these teams have just been flat out dominating all season. And the first one on my list is no surprise to anybody who knows anything about college basketball this season. It's St. Louis and Josh Schertz. They all have been dynamic this season. They lead one of the best offenses in the country, led by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Robbie Avila, who was a former Indiana State Sycamore from when Josh Schertz was over there in 2024. He led them to a 28-6 record, and they were famously snubbed from the tournament that season because they didn't win Arch Madness that season. So I believe that St. Louis's ability to rely on different guys on offense is what's going to potentially carry them deep into the postseason this year. And I think they can really make an impact. They have a phenomenal offense, as I mentioned. They average over 90 points per game. They have one loss on the season, which was to Stanford on a neutral court on a fadeaway sideline three-pointer that was just an absolute moon ball, somehow went in. Stanford pulls off a miracle in that game. So that's the one loss for St. Louis. They might be ranked in the top 12, 15 if they hadn't lost that game. And the A10 is not a horrendous conference. Like, they can pick up a fringe quad 2 and a lot of quad 3 wins. So, but overall, as I mentioned, a dynamic offense, 90 plus points per game, 6th in 3-point percentage, 3rd in field goal percentage, 11th in assists, 7th in rebounding, which this is honestly the thing that makes me the most aware of St. Louis this season. A lot of mid-majors cannot rebound to save their lives, and the teams that can rebound go far. Think of FAU with Vladislav Golden and Dusty May. Golden was a massive human, 7'2" or so, I believe, and he was able to clean up the glass, and that ultimately was able to win them to the Final Four because they beat K-State and they destroyed them on the offensive rebounding in 2023. So I think rebounding is an underrated thing to look at for mid-majors because a lot of them just don't have the bodies to put up with these high-level P4 teams. But St. Louis is a tremendous rebounding team, so I think that can help carry them far into the postseason this season. And then they also have one of the best turnover rates in the country, so they don't turn the ball over on offense. They take care of the ball, they play fast in transition, and they score a lot of points. They have 5 guys who average over 10 points a game, which is also something nice for the tournament because you can't focus in on one guy because the attack could come at you from 5 different angles. I almost guarantee you whoever they play in the first round will focus their attention on Robbie Avila. You don't want to let the most common guy, the most obvious guy who can take over the game. So I would assume that Robbie Avila won't be the guy in many tournament games, at least the first one for sure. So that's something to look at, but they have talented players all over that team, and they can really run up the scoreboard, so that's something to watch in March. They, to me, are probably the best mid-major team since 2020 Dayton. If you want to call them not a mid-major because they're not truly like in the bottom tier of D1, that's fine. But the A10 is a fringe mid-major to me. So they're just an incredible squad. I think, obviously, the 2020 NCAA tournament got canceled, so we don't know how far that Dayton-led Obi Toppin team would have gone. But I think this will be the highest-ranked, again, mid-major-ish tier team since we saw the 2014 Wichita State Shockers that went undefeated and were a 1 seed. So obviously St. Louis can't go undefeated. The next team on our list can, but I think St. Louis has a real claim of if they win out to be a 4 or a 5 seed. They're totally entitled to that right now. I believe right now they're projected on a 6 or 7 seed line. So that's just something to continue to watch for the rest of this season. There was 2 unbeaten teams in America until going into this week. And then Arizona lost in Allen Fieldhouse on Tuesday night. Then Arizona lost to Kansas and Allen Fieldhouse on Monday night. And that leaves one left. I'm going to give you a second to think about who could the last unbeaten team in the country be. You won't guess it. It is Miami, Ohio, out of the MAC Conference. The Mid-American Conference has an undefeated squad, and it's Miami, Ohio. They have been really good all season long. They've taken some tough challenges recently by Buffalo and Kent State, 2 of the teams that are towards the top of the MAC, but they continue to find a way to be unbeaten, and they just continue to find ways to win. They have multiple overtime games, one game I believe that even went into 2 overtimes. They just find a way to win. They outscore the opponent is their calling card. Their defense is not especially special. They're just kind of average on defense, but the offense is their calling card, as I mentioned. They average over 90 points per game, I believe. They are top in the Miami, Ohio is led by the guard pairing of Peter Suter and Brant Byers. Those are their 2 guys that you should know and to watch for if they make a deep run into the tournament. And as I mentioned, the defensive ratings and especially the rebounding ratings don't favor them that much, but they have a blistering offense. I mean, they score the ball at maybe the best rate in the country. They do average the most points in the country, and they do have the highest field goal percentage in the country. So the statistics do favor them in terms of offense. Defense, not so much. And similarly to St. Louis, they do have 5 guys who score in double digits on a night in, night out basis. They run a balanced offensive attack, and they shoot really well from 3. So that's the brief synopsis on Miami, Ohio, and why they've been so good this season. But overall, from a Cinderella and deep tournament standpoint, I like St. Louis just a little bit more because of that rebounding and defense. But going into other mid-majors here and G5 teams that you should note, Utah State is consistently a really good team, and they've continued to just be a tournament threat year in and year out. Jared Calhoun this season is the head coach, and they've been really good in the Mountain West. They have 2 16-plus point per game scorers, Mason Falslev and MJ Collins. Those are the 2 guys that really carry the load on offense for that Utah State Aggies team. And so they're not the only good team in the Mountain West. You have San Diego State led by Brian Dutcher, and this is the same coach who led them to the national championship in 2023. So always look for San Diego State to potentially make a run in the NCAA tournament. And you never know what can happen with teams like Utah State and San Diego State that are battle tested in their own conference, whether you see that or not. The Mountain West is a good basketball conference. They typically put multiple teams into the tournament. They get some at large bids. They really haven't done much in the tournament outside of the run by San Diego State to the national championship, which was kind of a weird year in general. All the 1 seeds and I believe 2 seeds lost that season. So that's just something to know, is that these Mountain West teams do maybe struggle a little bit come tournament time, but there's another team in the conference that I like as well. That's the New Mexico Lobos, coached by Eric Olin, who is the former coach of UC San Diego, the Tritons, who made their first tournament appearance last season, and in their first season transitioning up from D1, which was a very impressive accomplishment for Eric Olin and the Tritons. They went wire to wire with Michigan a year after coming up from D1, which is incredibly impressive, and they almost took them down. That was a very fun UC San Diego team. The New Mexico Lobos are, I believe, 16, 17 wins on the season right now, so continue to watch them. They might be able to win an at-large bid if they continue to win in the conference. And then moving over to the West Coast Conference, as I mentioned earlier, St. Mary's is always a tournament threat under Randy Bennett. He's a tremendous coach. They're known for their slow pace of play, and they're continuing that this season. They have a suffocating defense. They take care of the ball. They run good offensive sets, and they take care of the ball and limit the amount of possessions, and they take advantage of their offensive possessions. So that's the way that St. Mary's likes to play ball, and they've done it again this season. They're always going to not give up many points. They're only giving up around 60 points per game this season, which is one of the best in the country. So they have a great defense. They limit possessions. They play their brand of basketball, which is something to note, is that teams that play their tempo and are comfortable tend to go farther in the tournament. But that's not the best team in the West Coast Conference. It's not Gonzaga either. It's the Santa Clara Broncos. They are 12-1 in the conference as I'm recording this, and they run a bit of a different system than a lot of high-level teams in the country run. They run a 9-man system, so it allows them to stay fresh on both offense and defense. They sub in a lot of guys out, and the one thing that would worry me about picking them to go deep into the March Madness tournament this season is they are led by a redshirt freshman. He's their leading scorer. And so that just kind of worries me because I like some experience and some cohesiveness when it comes to these mid-major-ish teams and these potential Cinderellas. I like to see teams that are accustomed to playing with each other and are led by somebody who has tournament experience or just experience playing a lot of games at the college level. And that's not necessarily the case with this Santa Clara team, but they've been really good all season, and they might be able to steal an auto bid in the West Coast Conference from a team like Gonzaga or St. Mary's. And then, of course, moving back to the A10, we covered St. Louis, and George Mason was a team that got off to a really hot start in the A10. They were really good. They are in my list, but they suffered another loss last night, and so this is 3 conference losses to teams that really aren't all that good. So George Mason is a team to look out for. Potentially, they still have a really good record on the season, and they're coached by Tony Skinn, who's on a lot of hot boards right now to be a potential move-up candidate to another program after the season. So George Mason, you could watch potentially out of the A10. They might be able to steal the auto bid out of the conference from St. Louis. But the team I'm really watching here to put up a fight against St. Louis is VCU. VCU was okay at the start of the season. They were good, but they've really turned it on late into conference play, and they're making a dent into creating a good resume to get themselves into the tournament and potentially steal an at-large bid, potentially, if they go far in their conference tournament and continue to win in conference. But as I mentioned earlier, it's really tough for these teams in like the A10 and some conferences to build a resume that stacks up to other Power 4 teams on the bubble because their margin for error is so much more thin. If they lose some bad games like George Mason has, it drags your net rating so low. Like George Mason has lost games already to Duquesne and Rhode Island, and those are two losses that are really going to hurt their chances of getting an at-large bid on the season. So but George Mason and VCU have made deep tournament runs before, so that's something to note. They have a history of being a Cinderella team, so that's why I put them on the list. But obviously, I'd be shocked if St. Louis doesn't take the auto bid and clean up the A10 as they have all season to this point. The American Conference, home to the Wichita State Shockers, who are an extremely fun team if you have not been paying attention. Kenyon Giles is a pure sharpshooter. The dude, when he's hot, can pull up from anywhere on the court and hit. So this is a team that plays sound defense. They have good fundamentals, and they have some guys that can carry an offensive load, which is something that they really haven't had in the last couple of years under Paul Mills. So they've been really good in conference play, and they have been really hot recently. So continue to watch them in the American, and if they can continue that momentum into the conference tournament, they can actually put up a fight against the team who's currently leading the American, I believe, if not tied with USF, who's another good team. It's the 20-plus win Tulsa Golden Hurricanes, who are quietly building a good enough resume to get themselves in an at-large bid. So continue to watch the American. It's typically a one or two bid league. I think this year it'll be a one bid league. But if someone does like Wichita State or USF end up taking the auto bid out of the American, maybe Tulsa, if they continue to win and lose in a shocking fashion in the American tournament, they can maybe get in as an at-large and get that second team into the big dance for the American Conference. The Missouri Valley Conference, home to the Missouri Valley Conference up next, home to Belmont and Murray State. These are the two teams I'd watch here. Murray State did lose a couple nights ago, so that does damper my expectations for them a little bit. And Belmont is extremely good. This is the team to pick out of the Missouri Valley. The Missouri Valley produces good teams typically in the tournament. Obviously, Drake last year was incredibly good with Bennett Sturts and Ben McCullum. So the Belmont could be the version of that team this season. 10th in three-point percentage, 5th in field goal percentage. They are a lethal shooting team, which is something that we like to see in the tournament, a team that can get hot at the right moment. Players like Jack Golke come to mind that can just bomb it from anywhere on the court and hit and help their team advance. That's a really good trait to have for a Cinderella team in the tournament, and I like Belmont to be able to have that ability. Now, these teams are pretty well known if you're watching college basketball on a somewhat frequent basis, and we want to know who the real teams are who can really surprise. We're talking about the UMBCs, the FDUs, the Florida Gulf Coast, the Loyola Chicagos, those teams like that, the teams on the 13 through 16 seed line. So this is where we get deeper and we get into the advanced teams deep here. And the first one I have on my list is Winthrop. They're going to be on the 13 or 14 line. They're 10-1 in conference, which is exactly what's in their name, win. That's all Winthrop does. They have a very strong non-conference schedule so far, and their resume looks good. They suffered a 6-point loss to George Mason, who, as I mentioned, was a really good team earlier on in the season. They lost to Arkansas on the road by 1, and they lost to Nebraska, who is one of the top teams in the country, on the road by only 7. So this is a Winthrop team that is battle tested in the non-conference, that you could feel comfortable putting up against a Power 4 team in the tournament, and that they have held their ground against these teams. And if these are on a neutral court, there's a chance that these games might actually be won by Winthrop. So that's something to watch. And overall, I like Winthrop, but there's another team in the Big South. It is High Point. They were the conference champions last season under Alan Huss. He left to go be the head coach in waiting at Creighton, his alma mater, and they beat High Point by 17 points. High Point is still really good this year. I believe they're 22-4 on the season. So High Point is another team to continue to watch out of the Big South, and they're 10-1 in conference as well. So this is another team to watch out of the Big South. High Point and Winthrop. I like Winthrop. They could be a sneaky pick here in March Madness, so continue to watch them. The Big West is a conference you don't hear much about really ever, but that's the home to the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors, who are currently winning the Big West Conference right now. And it's always fun to see Hawaii in the March Madness tournament or just on the big stage in general because you don't get to see them very often. And the name Rainbow Warriors is really fun. So that's another team I would watch for in the Big West. But sneakily, watch out for the UCs. You're going to want to note these teams: UC Santa Barbara and UC Irvine. UC Irvine, the Anteaters, are still coached by Russell Turner, who was the coach for them in 2019 when they knocked off Kansas State as a 4 seed. So these teams such as UC Santa Barbara, UC Irvine, they could put up a fight with Hawaii and maybe steal the Big West. They're not going to be good enough of a conference to get 2 teams in. So they're going to be fighting tooth and nail for that auto bid out of the Big West. So I'm rooting for Hawaii to come out, and because who doesn't want to see the Rainbow Warriors? And it's just fun. They have nice uniforms, and their name is the Rainbow Warriors. What more could you possibly want? Moving into the CAA conference, UNC Wilmington is currently running it. They have 20-plus wins on the season. They're tournament tested. They were in the tournament last season. They played Texas Tech in the Wichita Regional. They lost to them just narrowly in the round of 64. And so typically that's a good trademark to look for in a team, is that they made the tournament, couldn't quite get over the hump, and now they're going to make it back the second year in a row with that bitter taste in their mouth of losing in the first round, and they want to get that win. But teams like College of Charleston and Hofstra could put up a fight for the CAA championship, so continue to watch them. It's not a runaway right now for UNC Wilmington as other conferences are, such as this next one, Liberty. They're 12-0. They're perfect in conference. No other team is close to them. No other team has more than 8 wins in conference. So I like Liberty to come out of Conference USA, and I think they're just running that conference. Let's be real. You can almost pencil in Liberty in your bracket right now as a 12 or 13 seed. Horizon League. This is another league that isn't very talked about, but has sneaky had some good teams come out of it in the past. The one I already mentioned earlier, Jack Golke in Oakland, came out of the Horizon League and knocked off Kentucky. So that's a team to watch. Obviously, again, Oakland, they're having a solid season, and they continue to have their same coach that they did from a couple of years back. He's been there forever. But the team leading the Horizon League right now is Wright State. They're projected to be on the 15 seed line, and that's who is currently projected to come out of the Horizon League. But another team I want to draw your attention to is Green Bay. They are coached by Doug Gottlieb, who had a really horrendous season there last year. I believe they finished with 4 wins. They had a lot of smoke and drama and just bad vibes surrounding the program, but they really turned it around, and they've been solid this season. They've been good, so maybe watch for them to make a run in the Horizon League tournament. Maybe they steal the bid. They've been a good team all season long, but obviously Wright State is the projected team to come out of the Horizon League. Now moving into the Ivy League, where the 2 brainiacs in the Ivy League are battling it out right now, Harvard and Yale. Harvard started off the season bad. They were not that good, but they're 6-2 in conference, so they've turned their season around in conference play. Yale has just been really good all season long, and for a matter of fact, they've been good the last 2 years. Yale has made the tournament and won the Ivy League the last 2 years, so continue to watch. a program like Yale. They're 18-4, I believe, on the season right now. So watch them. They've made the tournament the last 2 years, haven't won a game. So maybe this third year, as we mentioned with UNC Wilmington, can help get them over the hump and get that tournament win. Moving into the MAC. We already talked about the MAC. We're going to talk about a different MAC. This is the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference, the MAAC, and talk about an underrated conference. There's 4 teams right now, 5 teams actually, who have 10-plus conference wins. For Quinnipiac, Marist, Siena, St. Peter's, who we obviously all know from their insane tournament run with Shaheen Holloway and Doug Edert, and Merrimack. Merrimack is projected to come out of the conference. There will be a 16 most likely, but as I mentioned, these teams are all closely tied together in the conference, 10-plus conference wins. We're all rooting for St. Peter's, obviously. They're the Peacocks. We want to see them back in the tournament and make another run, but Merrimack is currently projected to come out of the MAC conference, so just continue to watch that one. That's going to be tightly contested all season long, and maybe that's a conference tournament you want to tune into. UT Martin is currently atop the Ohio Valley, and this is a team I'm especially pulling for because they've been D1 since 1992, and they have yet to make an NCAA tournament. To me, this is what March is all about, seeing these teams like UT Martin, who are currently running away with the Ohio Valley and can make a dent in March Madness, and they might be able to go on a run powered by the idea that their program hasn't seen March in its history. So UT Martin, the Skyhawks, I believe, we're all pulling for you, and we all want to see you in the tournament. I believe there's another one on here that has not made a tournament, so there's 2 teams to watch out for. Navy is currently just running the Patriot League. They're 20-4, I believe. There's nobody in the Patriot League that's even close to being as good as them. They're projected to be a 16 right now. And a fun storyline to note here is they're a service academy. We haven't seen one in the big dance since Air Force in 2006. So this is 20 years straight without having a service academy in the big dance. We might get Navy in there this season. It certainly looks that way. So it'll be fun to see if Navy can pull that off and actually make the tournament for the first time since a service academy did it in 2006. The Southland Conference is honestly probably my favorite right now. It's a super underrated conference. There's 2 really good teams, 2 sleeper teams coming out of the conference, and I'm telling you, one of these teams will be picked for an upset in my bracket. So stay tuned for that bracket prediction coming out once March Madness happens. But the Stephen F. Austin Lumberjacks are for real. They are a legit squad. They have a first-year head coach who some of you may know, may recognize the name. Former Wichita State basketball player Matt Brower is currently the head coach of the Stephen F. Austin Lumberjacks after spending a lot of time at Texas Tech under their head coach Grant McCasland. And he's done a phenomenal job with them this season, 15-1, I believe. And they have a lot of wins on the regular season. I believe they're 22-4 or somewhere around that. And continue to watch for Stephen F. Austin. If they do make the tournament, which I would assume, they will be on the 13 or 14 line. I like that matchup for them. I think they can beat a 3 or a 4 seed. And Stephen F. Austin, depending on the matchup, obviously, I like the Lumberjacks in the tournament. But I would be remiss to not mention a team that was a tournament darling last season who's having another incredible season, 13-3 in conference, 20-5 on the season. They may have lost head coach Will Wade and the infamous manager Amir Orakan, but McNeese State has been incredible once again this season with a new coach. As I mentioned, 20-5 on the season. They're going to put up a fight with Stephen F. Austin in the Southland Conference, but obviously Stephen F. Austin's been running the gauntlet all season long. So I like Stephen F. Austin to still come out of the Southland, but McNeese State is another team to mention there. They have tournament experience over the last couple of years. Moving into the Summit League, we have North Dakota State and the St. Thomas Tommies currently at both 20-6 on the season. I like North Dakota State. They're another team that I like and might pick them for an upset in the bracket. All depends on what matchup they draw. But as a potential 12 to 14 seed, I like them. and I think they do a lot of things well that can make them a potential Cinderella team coming out of the Summit League. And then, as I mentioned, we have one more team who has not ever made the tournament in their program history. California Baptist, out of the WAC conference, made the move up to D1 in 2018. They're currently on an 8-game win streak, and they are currently leading the WAC. So this is a team I'm rooting for, California Baptist. I want to see them make the tournament. I don't think they can probably win a game, but hey, steps for the program, right? We want to see a team like California Baptist make the dance, and that's what March is all about. So now overall that you have a grasp of who the Cinderellas are that I'm looking at, I want to give you my top teams and the top teams in the country that I believe you should be looking for and the teams that I think could make a run in March. Obviously, we still have a lot of basketball to play, a whole nother month around there, and then we have conference tournaments. Things will change. People will steal bids. I think of NC State. They were really awful the entire season long with DJ Burns, and they go on a run in the ACC tournament, and they make it to the Final Four. So it's just completely out of nowhere sometimes like that, but some teams that I am keeping my eye on this season are Arizona. As I mentioned, they were undefeated at one point until they lost this week to Kansas. Michigan, Houston, Duke, UConn, Illinois, UNC, St. Louis, and Kansas. Kansas totally hinges on Darren Peterson. They're a good team without him, and they honestly might be better without Darren Peterson, but I think you really need that bucket down the stretch of a game, and having a second option to play with Melvin Council at guard, I think could be really important. And even if you don't get a full game out of Darren Peterson, which I doubt you ever will, but even having him for 20, 25 minutes could be a big boost to this Kansas roster. As of February 11th, 2026, I'm going to make a national championship prediction. There's obviously, I mentioned, a lot of season left to be played, a lot of teams that could enter this mix, some fringe teams, some teams I considered, UConn, Houston, Duke, obviously Michigan. I'm going with the Arizona Wildcats. I think they're a tremendously well-coached team. They're very disruptive on defense, which is what I like to see. Tommy Lloyd does a phenomenal job with them, and he built a really great roster. He has two phenomenal freshmen in Koa Pete and Braden Burries. Burries absolutely took over the KU game. He was the only reason why that game was really close. Jaden Bradley is another guy on their squad who I really like. He had a really bad game. I believe he only had 4 points or somewhere around there. So they have a lot of experience on their team, but also paired with youth, which is what I really like out of their squad. Toby Awaka, Montius Krivas, and Jaden Bradley, as I mentioned, those are the names of veterans on the squad. Pair them with the freshman duo that I mentioned, and I think they have the perfect blend of raw talent and experience to carry them on a deep tournament run. And Tommy Lloyd is no stranger to March. He's been in it a lot. He knows how to win. He's made tournament runs before. And I think this is the best team he's coached at Arizona. I really like them to make a deep tournament run this season. Maybe not the national championship, right? But I feel pretty strongly that this team is in at least an Elite Eight team and should get you some points in your bracket. Thank you guys so much for listening. Comment below who your tournament prediction national champion is right now. I would be very interested to hear it. I know Arizona may be a bit of a divisive pick after how they played this week against KU at Allen Fieldhouse, but I think Arizona has a decent shot of winning that game if it's on a neutral court. And so let me know also in the comments who your favorite mid-major team is right now, who you think will be a Cinderella, and don't say St. Louis or Miami, Ohio. Those aren't Cinderellas. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll see you all in the next episode.